Hello and welcome to this very first interview conversation of the Soul Leadership Tribe podcast, which is of course impactful conversations about wealth, health and abundance from the metaphysical to the material, because I take a very holistic view of wealth, because wealth doesn't just mean making money, of course. It means everything from the emotional to the mental to the physical to the spiritual to the financial. It is all encompassing. And so that's a lovely segue into my very first interview guest, which is my very good friend, Bliss Hennessy, who is a women's holistic health, wellness and transformational coach. And she also happens to be my personal trainer as well, which is another fabulous string to her bow too. And this conversation is all about her experience of being on the contraceptive pill when she was younger. Now that might seem like a bit of a strange conversation, but if you think about the context of what this podcast is all about, it's really to have conversations about the whole gamut of human experience and how that impacts wealth and health. And it's really important that as men in particular, we understand how this impacts the ladies in our life. And Bliss and I will be having conversations in the future as a follow-on from this. In fact, there's loads and loads we've got lined up. But yeah, it's just a quick introduction, so I hope you enjoy. As always, please like, subscribe, share, comment. Really helps with the algorithm and helps it get seen by more people. So yeah, enjoy and let me know what you think. Okay, let's go. And welcome to the Soul Leadership Tribe podcast. This is actually the inaugural episode, and I've been blessed by the presence of my beautiful friend, Bliss Hennessy, who really wanted to share her experience of being on the contraceptive pill, because it's really, really important that women and men, to be honest with you, actually know the impact of this. Because what this podcast is all about is really about the holistic nature of life, from a health perspective, from a mental well-being perspective, from a spiritual perspective, from an abundance perspective, and how that impacts us in terms of what we're doing in life and how we feel and the joy that we experience. So yeah, I'm absolutely delighted to have Bliss on as my very, very first guest. So Bliss helps women to live in health, happiness and peace, in the peace that they deserve, by working with themselves in self-love, connection and care, which is wonderful. But Bliss, how did you actually get to that point, and what's your journey been? Just a quick overhead summary.
Yeah, thank you. It all started with me in my teenage years, being very disconnected from myself, not realizing this at the time, but being very disconnected from myself, experiencing trauma early on, a lot of kind of emotional, mental turmoil, and then finding fitness or finding bodybuilding at one of my lowest points, and then just going with that. So I then became super interested in that, ended up doing a personal training course, and then that was my route into coaching. Did this for years, and during that realized that it wasn't just about fitness. It wasn't just about the physical aspect of it. There was a lot more to it. So I focused on a lot of the mindset stuff, the behavior stuff, knowing that people aren't going to be able to achieve their fitness goals or their health goals unless they then factor in the mental emotional side, which is what drives our behaviors. So from there, have just then gradually expanded on my journey as well, then ended up kind of connecting with the spiritual aspect of myself in that time. And then it's just expanded into more of a holistic way of just a bit of everything, mind, body, spirit, emotions, all of it, and how it's all interconnected. And we can't just ignore one part of it. It's if we truly want to be the most healthy, happy, peaceful, confident and individuals and have a fulfilling life, we need to make sure that we factor it all in and not neglect certain aspects or avoid, suppress certain aspects of it. So yeah, it's been a journey.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I've
that's
still
been
got so long left.
Yeah. And having been privileged enough to have had a ringside seat to how this has unfolded for you in the last 3 years, 2.5 to 3 years. Yeah, I can vouch for that. It's been one hell of a ride for you, but it's just wonderful that you're in this space now. One thing I wanted to ask is what inspired your decision to focus on working with women?
Yeah, so there's on my journey, it goes into the topic of conversation that we are going to have today as well. I realize even more so now how women and men need different approaches. Women are, being a woman myself, so much of the information out there in terms of what we should do, specifically within the health and wellness aspect of things, the research has been done on men, or the vast majority of research has been done on men. And if it has been done on women, a lot of the research has been done on women who are either postmenopausal or who are on a form of hormonal contraceptive, which takes women out of their cycles, which means that research isn't applicable to women who are in their reproductive years, who are on their, like, within their natural cycles. They're not on any contraceptive. And so because we have all of that information around kind of, or focused on men, so many women are burning themselves out trying to like get healthy in the way that they think that they should because of this information, and they don't know that there's more information, and that's not necessarily applicable to them. That's not going to help them. And I've just seen how we need a different approach. And yeah, women and men are different, and I think it's very important for women especially. I feel like within this current society, women are encouraged to be more like men and be able to be on the go all the time, be linear and get up and do the same things every day. And we're on a different cycle. We have a different cycle over a month, not a day. So it's very important to factor that in. And having done that within the last few years since coming off the pill in my life, I've realized so much. Now I can notice when I feel stressed, when I feel frustrated with myself and I'm working against myself, I realize then in the moment, I reconnect with myself and I focus on where I think about where I'm at in my cycle. And it is usually in the week before my period. And then I'm thinking, I need to be doing this, need to be doing that. And I'm like, no, this is a time to slow down. And just reminding yourself of that, being able to work with yourself and how we naturally are. It's our natural physiology. So work against it and we just end up more stressed, frustrated, unhealthy as well. So this is why I've seen how important it is for women, if they want to be their most happy, healthy selves. This is something that needs factoring in, which is why I feel like women, being a woman myself, really, really need this help at the moment to come back to themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. So thank you for sharing that. And what I would say as well to our soul brothers who are watching this, it is really important that we as men understand this as well, because what we find is not just in romantic relationships, but just in terms of relating to each other in general, because you could look at a really deeper spiritual element of it and actually say we are all one, we are all interconnected. Yes, that is absolutely true, but our spirits, our souls, our sentience, whatever you want to call it, live in these physical bodies, and our physiology as males and females is very, very, very different, and it produces very, very different effects in exactly as you shared. So I think it is really, really important that us guys out there understand this, because it makes a huge difference in terms of how we relate to our partners, as men, if you're straight obviously, but as to our partners, to our sisters, our mothers, just any interaction that we have with women, particularly if we work with them as well, it's so important to understand this, because again, there's just so much disconnection through ignorance and through programming as well. That's not to say that anybody's doing this on purpose. It's just because we don't know any better, and we've not been shown, and we're not being educated on this. I mean, I was listening, just to give you an example, I was listening to a podcast that Bliss shared with me last week about the pill and how everything works, and then through the phases of the monthly cycle. And I was almost embarrassed when I was listening to it, thinking, my God, I don't know any of this, or hardly any of it. But at the same time, it was like, what a wonderful opportunity to expand our knowledge, because ultimately what this does is it just creates a much more enjoyable, loving, connective life for all of us, you know, no matter what our dynamic is between male and female. So thanks for that, Bliss. So the inspiration for this chat was that you saw a post on pill and deficiencies, and round about the same time you saw a photo of yourself from round about November 2020, and you were saying just how shocked you were, just in terms of the bloatiness you felt on your face and your complexion and the spots, and so what I'd like to say to everyone listening is that this conversation is not medical advice. It's not scientific advice about the pill. And if you're interested in that, there's loads and loads of places you can go and look that up. If you connect with either me or Bliss, Bliss especially, there are resources that she can share around that. This conversation is actually about Bliss's experience, and what that will hopefully do is that the many women out there who are listening to this will be able to relate to it and connect to it and help inform what they're doing and how they see things in terms of contraception. So yeah, Bliss would like to share her own experience of being on, then coming off the pill, because she feels it's super important for all women to understand all the options, the influences and the impact, to make a much more informed decision that's grounded in their own wisdom, as opposed to simply taking medical advice at face value. And that's such a biggie, taking the medical advice at face value, which, you know, we could spend a whole, you know, day talking about that. But well, let's not go there. So Bliss, when that's probably another 3 or 4 podcasts for another time.
Yeah, there's so much that goes into that.
Yeah, isn't there? But when we were sort of planning this out a few weeks ago, let's start off with what you said you wish to discuss, which was the beginning of the story for you in terms of the contraceptive pill and why you chose to go on it.
Yeah, so I went on the pill at the age of 15. At that point, it was just a normal thing to do. And it was, so a lot of people go on the pill for kind of painful, heavy periods and things like that. But that wasn't the reason that I went on. It was just like, then became sexually active, and then that was the norm to go. That was the norm to go on. So yeah, and I mean, it did, having been in the first few years of starting my periods, it did make them lighter, made them less painful, less heavy. So it did have that impact as well. But the main reason wasn't for kind of any medical reasons. I know that is many people's reasons. They go to the doctors, and then doctor suggests go on this and it will make everything better. And I think it's important I had no idea at the time, but now knowing that as soon as you then start taking hormonal contraceptives, it takes you out of your natural cycles. So if you do have the breaks on the pill, whether it's through the like sugar pills or just taking a break from them as your kind of period, it's not actually a period, because you're not, to have had a period, you need to have ovulated. and the pill stops you from ovulating.
Mm.
So it's not an actual period, and it's called like a withdrawal bleed. So it makes them lighter because it's not a true period. And it's
And when you went to see the doctor at the time, I'm assuming that none of this was discussed.
yeah, no, nothing. It was just yeah, okay, here you go.
Here you go.
It's a normal
I get
thing.
paid for prescribing these, so there you go.
Yeah, it's just a normal thing of I feel like it's such a common conversation. Maybe it's just I don't know, it may not be everywhere. I don't think it is everywhere in the world, but within the environments that I've been in and that I've grown up in, and many other people that I've spoken to, and not just in the UK but America, Canada, wherever as well, it is just the norm that, okay, I'm getting to this age now, the thing that you do is to go on contraceptive, and they're reluctant to put people on kind of, or give injections and things like that, the contraceptive injection at a younger age. So the norm is to go on the pill. And there, yeah, go to the doctors, there are no questions asked. It's just, yes, okay, here you go. And
Yeah,
of course, you
clearly,
get the the kind of side effects booklet like you do with every medication that you get, but it's not encouraged to go through that or think about it. It's just, okay, you want to go on the pill, we'll put you on this one first. This is kind of generic one that we put everyone on because it's got the least amount of side effects, which is a fairly like low dose. So I was put on microgrind 30 at first, for reference to people, if people have had the same experience. And yeah, I mean, things were fine, but again, I wasn't conscious of them not being, because nothing had been explained. I wasn't kind of looking out for any symptoms or anything like that. I didn't have any huge reactions. I know that some people do. Some people get quite bad reactions and symptoms, side effects, and they do have to stop it, or go to a different one. But yeah, I didn't. I was on that for quite a few years, and then ended up going over to, I started having like what they call breakthrough bleeding. So I was still on the pill, but at a time where I wasn't meant to bleed, I would. And this happened quite a few times. And
can I just ask you how old, firstly, how old were you when that happened? And secondly, what impact did that have on you psychologically when that started to happen?
Yeah, psychologically, so I think I was around 19 when that was. So I'd been on it like a good few years. And psychologically, I just didn't, because I didn't have an awareness of what was necessarily going on. I didn't really think too much of it. I knew that something wasn't quite right, but I didn't know anything else other than that. I didn't necessarily know why it was happening. But yeah, when I went to the doctors, they just said, oh, I needed to go on a higher estrogen pill to stop it, because my body had got used to it. And so it wasn't necessarily working as it should anymore. Basically, those hormones weren't enough to then override my hormones. So I needed more for it to work. So me, again, not knowing any different, thought, okay, I'll go. And I guess even at that point, I didn't necessarily fully trust the doctors, because at that point I took that information, didn't make a decision at the time, went away and researched different pills so that I could decide which I was going to go on, and go back to the doctor and tell them which one I wanted to go on. So I did that. And yeah, I was at the age of 19. I went away, did research, and looked at all the different pills, and because there are many different pills, they all have different combinations of estrogen and progestin, which is the like synthetic version of progesterone. All got different combinations, different brands. So I looked at all of these, and in my research figured out that if I had to go on a higher estrogen, rather than just going up a tiny bit, because I was on one of the lowest ones, I was on a super low hormone pill for both the estrogen and progestin, I realized that if I was to take a bigger jump up, this would impact my boobs, because I was very unhappy, very self-conscious about the fact that I had small boobs. So if I were to take, go.
And at the time, it's worth mentioning, because you were doing you were actually bodybuilding training at the time, and that had the physical, had the visual effect of shrinking the size of your boobs in terms of appearance wise, didn't it?
Yeah. So as a teenager, I was always very slim. Having done gymnastics when I was quite young as well, I do have a more like naturally slim and leaner and more athletic build. So yeah, boobs weren't necessarily there. Then had started bodybuilding, and any fat that I did have had then like been reduced even more, and of course comes off your boobs fast. So it doesn't necessarily, but a lot of the time it does. So yeah, I was in a space where, although I was bodybuilding and had been for a good few years by then, I was very unhappy with the way I looked still. I was very self-conscious. Yeah, I did have body dysmorphia. So yeah, at this point I realized if I were to take a higher estrogen pill, then I'd get a free boob job. So that's what I did. I decided to go
prescription as well, without having to pay $4,000 to get it done.
Yep. And I have silicone within my body, or any other form. So yeah, I did this. I researched, and rather than just going up a little bit in estrogen, I decided to go up hugely. So I went back to the doctors and asked for this pill. I can't even remember what it was called now. Celeste. Which was a huge jump up.
Just to interject for a second, Bliss. What of that body dysmorphia, boob appearance, what effect for you at the time did your perception of societal expectations have on that?
Yeah. I mean, it was impacted. I mean, when I was growing up, I was called, not bullied, but very often people would call me anorexic. And it did really get to me. That was one of the things that I was like very, very self-conscious about. And there's a reason for why I took to bodybuilding like so well, because it was a way that I could change my appearance and not be so skinny. So, and then when you're within that bodybuilding, because I was training within a bodybuilding gym as well, so you're in that culture where being called slim, being called skinny is the biggest insult, or small. So yeah, being in environments where that is encouraged as well. And I think the age as well, being at that age, being a female at that age, through school and then through college, it's the looks and aesthetics is the focus of it. And I think it's difficult, or more difficult at that age, when you're figuring things out and you don't necessarily know more about the world, to just let those comments go. And a lot of the comments do come from jealousy, from a lack of understanding. If other girls are overweight, then it's I just call them super skinny and be an insult. But really that's their kind of projection, without going into the spiritual side of things and mental psychological side of things. But and coming from jealousy, from a projection. So yeah, it was my focus was less on how I felt, although I felt like that. It was difficult for me to separate how I felt with how society and the environments that I was in
expected your body to look.
What the expectation and the kind of norm was. At that point, I didn't have the tools and skills to separate it. Whereas now it's easier to separate that, and it comes from how I feel. There's no, how I feel isn't necessarily attached, or maybe in some ways still, but isn't attached to what other people think about me, or what I think other people think about me.
So for the next 2.5 years, so the next 2.5 years, you were on that Superwoman dose. Interestingly,
Yes.
one point I do want to, that's just popped into my mind is, was there no, from the doctor, when you went back and told them what it was that you wanted, was there no comeback? Was there no questioning on that?
No, it was just
Wow.
okay.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, there was definitely, it was just okay, yeah, we can do that. Like, that will stop obviously I'm going back because I've had breakthrough bleeding. And that was kind of the issue that they needed to fix. So in their eyes, it stops it, fixes it, and they still get money. So it's fine.
Yeah. We get paid, you're fixed, next patient, off you go.
Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah,
that just blows my mind that a doctor would allow a 19-year-old patient to just come in and basically tell them their job, and then just prescribe whatever and go. And this isn't medical profession bashing, but it is worth pointing out that really that kind of thing shouldn't happen. But again, there's a different conversation for another time about the reasons behind that. So so you got the new Superwoman dose, and then for the next 2.5 years you were on that. But I remember in our conversation notes, you mentioned you still had some pretty serious booby hatred going on at the time.
And it's crazy because it was like they did grow, but obviously it's not an instant thing. You take the first pill and it's instant, and then all of a sudden huge.
Wake up the next morning like, oh, need a new bra.
Had an actual boob job. So it happens over time, yes. But they did grow, but I didn't realize this until after. So being on that, again, going onto that pill and it being a step up, I didn't really notice much of a difference. But then I think it's also important I was having a conversation with a client actually about how it's difficult to, again, separate your experience. It's difficult to be aware of how you feel, because how you feel is impacted by the hormones that you're taking. And so whilst you're on the pill, whilst you're on any hormonal contraceptive, it's difficult to then be like, oh, okay, am I being emotional? Is this like excessive mood swings? And you can be aware to an extent, but also your awareness, because the pill doesn't just impact like your womb or like fertility side of things. It's then absorbed. So we have receptors within like pretty much every system of our body that for these like sex hormones of estrogen, progesterone. And so the pill, when we take the pill, every system within our body, brain included, is impacted by this. It's not just like your womb, your fertility. It's every single system. So it's difficult to then separate and be aware of how you are actually behaving, the actions that you're taking, because the pill that you're taking is impacting that and is changing the way that you think, is changing the way that you make decisions and how you feel. And so it's not until after that you can then kind of retrospectively notice little things about how you were. And you can especially notice it if you were to kind of keep a diary or write things down and make a note of it. It's a lot easier to then identify these things. But yeah, whilst on it, I didn't necessarily notice any differences too much. Over time, I realized that my boobs have got bigger, but again, not really. That's more of a thing that I've realized now when I see pictures and I'm like, whoa, I did not realize that my boobs, they were never huge, but since coming off, obviously they've now like got even smaller. I think they're probably the smallest that they've ever been since they probably like started growing. But the way that I feel now, because I am now in tune with myself and have done lots of work over time within the kind of self-love, care, confidence, connection side of things, I absolutely love my boobs now. And I see these pictures where my boobs were so much bigger. And then I think back to how I seriously hated my body. I'd be so self-confident back then. And now I'm like, why? Why did like, but when you're on it, again, it changes the way that you think. And yes, there were loads of other factors within it as well, in terms of the environments that I was in and how I felt at the time, the things that I was struggling with at the time mentally. It's not just the pill. I think that's important to make note of as well. But it is also important to.
But of course, that has a huge influence on what goes on, because of what you shared about how it changes. I mean,
Yeah.
I was absolutely amazed to hear in one of the podcasts that you shared with me for some background research into this conversation, was that it even changes your choice of partner, mate.
Mm-hmm.
I was amazed, and
Yeah.
the lady who was talking about it explained it, and you're like, wow, it's just
Yeah.
something you'd never, even something like that, you just never ever think about that. So you think, well, if that's impacting your fundamental sort of primal instinct in terms of who you're physically, emotionally, and sexually attracted to, as you say, you know, what impact's that having on the rest of your life? It's crazy.
Yeah, and that's the thing of like, that's the way that we then choose our partners. That's kind of the end result, isn't it? Of like, okay, how does that happen? And that happens through changing the way that we think about stuff, the way that we feel, which then results in that. And then, like you say, there are so many other ways that it then impacts us. And on that note as well, to just give more kind of information, it changes the way that we choose our partners and the way that we like the qualities that we look within men. We choose a lot more feminine men. It encourages us to kind of sleep around more, be more sexually active, and not stick to one person, not kind of make that relationship work. And because again, it takes us out of our natural cycles. It overrides our natural hormones by completely cutting the connection off between our brain and our ovaries and our like why am I forgetting words? What they like, glands. So yeah, it changes so much. Again, we don't necessarily realize, and I think even still the research, there's so much research to be done yet. I think we're only just starting to find out just how much this is impacting us in so many different ways.
It's absolutely crazy. I mean, like in that same conversation, listening to what it does to your liver in particular, and how it affects that, and just how important the liver is in terms of every single element of what it means to be a woman in everyday life, how it affects proteins and all the other hormones that are associated with that, and the impact that has behaviorally and perceptually in your day-to-day life. It was just, it actually just made me want to go and study it. I was like, this is incredible. Why don't we know about this stuff? But anyway, we digress. So at the end of 2019, that specific pill was discontinued. And then you mentioned in our conversation that you then researched options, and that then led you to actually come off it in February of 2020. So can you tell us a little bit about that phase?
Yeah, so I was then like informed that that specific pill, so the higher estrogen pill, would be discontinued, but there was a replacement for it. And I decided to like look into this replacement, and it was just made by a different brand. So it was the exact same hormones that were in the other one. It was just made by a different brand, but yet again, I was talking to a client who is a pharmacist, and she was saying how, although it's the same hormones, it's made by a different brand, it's made in a different way, and it impacts people in different ways. And I don't know the science behind that, but she has experienced it herself, and she knows the like research behind it, and knows all of the information behind that. And when I researched this replacement pill, this is like all of the information, people's experiences that they were talking about. They were saying that as soon as they shifted over, they were warning people not to take it, even though it's meant to be the same.
Wow.
They were saying, don't take it. I have been like the most depressed I've been in so long, had such bad mood swings, like it's really impacted them. And that just made me think about it. And I was like, oh, maybe like really, I was all for the kind of trust the science, and it's not going to be any different, the logical way of thinking back then. I was like, how can it be different? It's the exact same hormones in the same quantities. It can't be any different. It's not going to have a different effect. But then part of me was still thinking, oh, but they can't have been saying this then. Like, why are they saying this? And it made me think about it. And I was just going to go on to that replacement pill and take that. But then, like, I then had a conversation with a guy that I was seeing at the time, and he said, why don't you just come off it and see what it's like coming off it, and see where your hormones are at naturally. And I was like super scared to at that point. I had no idea on, I still thought that I had no idea on my cycles.
What made you scared?
Yeah, so I had no idea
why were you
about
frightened to come off it?
cycles. I had no idea about my, like, how things work. So I thought that if I came off it, I would just instantly get pregnant. How was I going to stop that? And it was, so my fear was based around the pregnancy side of things, because at that point I still had no idea. That I just thought you could get pregnant at any day, any point of your cycle, because I had not once been told this. So what was I, at the age of 20, 21, I still had no idea about this. I thought that you could get pregnant at any day in your cycle, and at one point in my education had I been told that you can't. Nobody around me had told me this. So I had no idea of my body, because I was completely disconnected from it, partly due to kind of education and what I've been told, but also taking the pill, because it disconnects you from your body, disconnects parts of like your anatomy, parts of your physiology. It completely disconnects. So it's just disconnection everywhere. And how can you tune into your body when you're completely detached, disconnected from it? Because you're taking something that overrides your body, your brain. So yeah, I had no idea about my cycles. I had no idea about how anything works. So I was scared that I would just get pregnant at any point. But I did end up deciding to come off it. So this was at the age of like 21. And yeah, so I came off it. I didn't know anything, didn't really do any research in terms of coming off the pill and any information around it. Just came off the pill. So that was, February 2020. At the same time, decided that I was going to stop using tampons and use menstrual cup. So literally within they aligned with each other. I stopped the pill, and then with my first period, like, things went back to normal from what I could tell in terms of having like a 28-day cycle, which is what it's meant to be. It's just the average cycle. So I started tracking my cycles from that point, using an app, just noting when my period was. At that point, it also told you, kind of predicted your ovulation, when it should be. But like, again, I didn't realize at that point that it's not actually your ovulation, because how can an app that's not connected to you predict when you're going to ovulate, when you're going to be fertile? It can't. So yeah, from that point, it was a process of just gradually reconnecting with my body again, and not intentionally at that point either. I didn't kind of consciously think, I'm going to reconnect to my body. Obviously, I had to then start tracking my cycles more. It was then that I realized you could only get pregnant at maximum of like 5-6 days of your cycle. So then I started to pay attention to when that was and like take precaution around that. And yeah, then my body, there's like a period where your body has to get used to it. It's not that you stop taking the pill and then instantly you're back into your natural cycles and everything's normal again, because you've been taking that pill for however long and it impacts everything within your body. So there is a process of your body then kind of regulating and coming back to normal, coming back to its baseline. And so yeah, in that period I then I was then starting to read books. So I read a book called In the Flow, which is about cycles and connecting with yourself. At that point, I was still very in my masculine, in the trust the science. And so I just found that I only read a few chapters of that book before was like, this is too feminist, like this is too way off the edge, like
burn it.
Yeah. So I then didn't read the rest of that. I have since read the whole book. But it just goes to show how disconnected you are from yourself, that triggered me enough for me to be like, no, that's bullshit, and not read it. So yeah, and then in that period, so from February 2020, was then tracking my cycles until I then realized after a few months, when my body started to come back to normal even more, that my boobs started to shrink.
Oh no.
Considering I already thought that they were small enough.
Yeah.
And happy with them. This really got to me.
Yeah. Yeah. How did that affect you then, emotionally, psychologically? Knowing that coming off it was the right thing on a felt level, but then having to work out how to come to terms with your boobs shrinking.
Well, so the reason I came off it as well, I think it's important, like it wasn't necessarily on a felt level. I came off it as a trial. Like it was more of a scientific trial, just to see. It wasn't I feel this is the right thing to do, because I had no connection with myself in that way. At that point, I came off it just to see how it would be. Yeah, I came off it, yeah, because I'd been on it since I was in school. I didn't know necessarily how my natural hormones would be, because I started taking the pill only a few years after I started my period anyway. So I didn't necessarily know a baseline normal. Yeah. So I thought that was kind of the right thing to do, just to see where things are at. But yeah, things were good. And saying that, during those times, because that coincided with the lockdowns as well, so I was training from home and like going out for runs and stuff, and I had some of my best training times during that time that I wasn't on the pill. I just felt so much more energetic. I felt so much better. Like, yeah, I had lots more energy. Really enjoyed.
Do you think there's a direct? Do you feel there was a direct correlation between the two events?
Yeah.
You coming off the pill and then you feeling the way that you did about training and energy? Yes,
but only retrospectively, because again, this wasn't something that I didn't pay too much attention to it at the time. I wasn't like kind of taking note of how I was feeling really. And again, it's difficult to kind of separate yourself from, again, in terms of how the pill impacts your brain and how you think. Then when I come off it, I don't know, it's difficult to like feel the difference. You can feel the difference, but it's difficult to kind of really distinctly tell between the two.
And I guess if you were still sort of much more in that masculine energy space, it would stop you from really paying any attention to that anyway, wouldn't it? Yeah.
Again, I'd started looking at more little bits of information around cycles, but it wasn't a conscious, like, okay, I'm going to make a huge change now and go in a different direction. I was just doing the basics because I felt like I had to understand how not to get pregnant, really.
Yeah.
So yeah, until then, it really started to impact me in terms of my boobs getting smaller. I could then see like little, so when we obviously get bigger and expand, we then get stretch marks, but also when we then get a lot smaller, they then become visible as well. So I then started to see like little tiny little stretch marks on my boobs, which I hadn't seen before, but it was because my boobs had shrunk so much that they were then visible. And I actually remember like me mentioning it at the time, having no idea that this is how things worked in terms of if you get smaller, you can then, the stretch marks are then visible. And I remember mentioning it to the guy that I was seeing at the time, and he then said that. And that was one of the worst things ever for my headspace. Because I was like, oh no. Like
That's it,
that
you
just
dumped.
then made it really clear. Yeah. That made it so clear. And from that point, I was like, oh no. Like I was in a bad enough headspace about it anyway. I just felt so rubbish about my body. And I think trying to kind of label it and explain what it was, I just felt less feminine, because that's how society is,
Of course.
in terms of like feminine, having boobs, having curves, and like the way that a female should look.
Absolutely. You just have to look around you in any online magazine, Hollywood media. Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's it did really impact me, really, really, really impact me, to the point I decided to start taking that pill again in July 2020. That was the only reason why. Not to not get pregnant, not for any other reason, but because my boobs had shrunk and I didn't like that. It's not just I didn't like that, I couldn't cope with that.
Yeah.
So I then started taking that high estrogen pill because I had some left over still. Again, in July 2020, after being off it for however many months I was, since February. And because my body had kind of got used to being on nothing again, and then I'm going straight in at super high estrogen pill and progestin, but super high estrogen, my body could not cope. I only took that pill for I think 2 weeks. In those 2 weeks, mood swings like crazy, serious depression, serious anxiety, lots of bad acne, like especially around, like all around my chin, like really, really painful, super red, super inflamed. That really, really got to me as well. I just didn't want to go out. I didn't want to be seen. And yeah, it got to the point towards the end of those 2 weeks, I was contemplating going on to like a progestin only pill or something like that to try and get rid of that, or try something else at least. Then I had really, really bad migraines, to the point I couldn't get out of bed. I started to get vertigo stuff as well. Like it was really bad. I think there were like 3-4 days that I was in bed, then couldn't work because I was doing everything online through the COVID stuff. And yeah, so and it was the pill. So as soon as I knew that was what it was, but I was so reluctant to accept that, because that meant I had to stop taking the pill. And so I thought, okay, I need to find other ways of making this work. I'm going to have to stop taking the pill because I cannot get out of bed. I'm seriously ill. So I stopped taking it, and I was very aware of kind of the risk in terms of, at that point, in terms of high estrogen and the links to kind of blood clots and blood pressure and things like that as well. So I was like, okay, I really need to stop taking this, and I can't right now. I can't get out of bed. I'm seriously like ill. I cannot function properly, so I'm going to have to stop taking it. And I think I had that level of reaction in terms of why I had that reaction then and not before when I was taking it, because before I'd almost had like a step up, and I was taking the lower hormone pill before, and then I moved on to the higher estrogen, so I had like a bit of a build up. Whereas this time I went from taking nothing for months to take in like loads of hormones, synthetic hormones. My body just could not cope.
Straight off the edge of a cliff, hoping there's water at the bottom.
Mm-hmm. All or nothing. Bit of a thing.
Unlike you. Very unlike you. Surprises me, that, Bliss. But anyway, sorry, carry on.
Yeah, so had to stop taking it at that point. Obviously, main reason I started taking it again was for my boobs to grow.
Yeah.
So then thought, how am I still going to get this impact? So at this point, I started researching into getting a boob job. Seriously researching into it, looking at all the places that did it, how much it was going to cost me, how I could then like create like financial plans in terms of how I was going to get that money, because that's how much it was impacting me. And yeah, did a lot of research into that for weeks, and that was the last time that I came off the pill, or the last time that I took the pill. So yeah, I took it for only a couple of weeks in that July, and since July 2020 I've had like nothing at all. Been completely
just going back to that that sort of final thing about seriously considering a boob job. What was it that made you decide not to do that in the end?
I think the money thing was obviously like a bit of a barrier I needed to get. If I had the money straight away, then it would have been a dangerous game. But I think it was just that obviously kind of prolonged things, and there was a bit more of a process to it. And I had other things that I needed to focus on a little bit more at the time, although that was in my head all the time. I'd done a lot of research on that, and that was kind of the plan. But because I'd done a lot of research on that and kind of put it to the side, like, okay, I know what I'm going to do now, I know who I need to contact. But the next step was getting that money first. That was kind of, okay, I can just leave that for the minute because I can't do anything else before I get the money. So I just then kind of continued with life. But then as the months went on, I then began to connect with myself more.
Beautiful.
Which then, I began to learn more about my cycles. Was that a
conscious decision, or did it just sort of happen subconsciously, as it were?
No, I did. Because I find like the physiology side of things and the biology side of things really fascinating. That's what kind of drew me to it. I just wanted to find out more about it. So it wasn't a kind of conscious in terms of I need to find out more because I need to get something from it. It was just I'm fascinated by this. I want to learn more about it. So yeah, and then just connected with myself, which wasn't a conscious thing. Over time, there are a lot of things that are kind of that are factors within it as well.
And when you say connected to yourself, Bliss, what does that mean to you specifically?
So again, lots of different factors within that, but the main thing of reconnecting with my body and not using my mind, my head to intellectualize everything, to override everything, and connect with my body and connect with the feminine aspect of me. I think that was the main part. As I then kind of from after that point, which I see retrospectively now how stopping the pill impacted my life hugely. And I feel like it kept me disconnected from myself, from the feminine aspect of me, from my natural cycles, from my body, my physiology, from my heart. Because from that point after, in the months after, then I then started to do a lot more work and kind of inner work, or people inner work or growth or self-development, whatever you want to call it. There was a lot of things that I hadn't dealt with in terms of like trauma or challenges, difficult experiences that I hadn't dealt with, that I then began to, or had kind of dealt with as much as I needed to, just to try and get by again. That I then began to move into, and I I'd say that the shift was I came out of my head and into my body more, into my heart more. It was at that point then, in the months after, that I then opened, and with your help, opened up to the fact that we have souls, that there's a spiritual aspect to us.
Oh my goodness. For anybody watching, I'm laughing because when Bliss and I first met and I started sharing the spiritual aspect, the initial few responses were along the lines of, that's BS.
Yeah, it's probably
And
put
now
in a
look at
very
you.
polite
Now
way
look
as
at
well.
you. Yes, I am for the sake of not being censored on YouTube. I'm being very, very polite. But yes, it's just it does make me laugh because I think it's because, you know, as I've said to you so many times, I sensed right from the start. I could feel that so powerfully within you, looking for a way to, well, not just looking for a way to get out, but I could see that it was starting to percolate through as well. And it's important to mention to anyone listening that this wasn't just like an instant, oh, like 1 minute I stopped the pill, 2 months later I'm where I'm at now.
Yeah.
There's been so many, as there is for all of us, there's been so many 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, 4 steps forwards, 2 steps sideways, and so on and so on and so on. It's a sticky, messy, crazy path. But at the same time,
human experience.
It's so beautiful at the same time. It's so effing difficult and painful and intense. But at the same time, it's a necessary part of that evolution. So yeah, it was really. I think back to that time, sort of 2.5 years ago, and it was just really magical starting to see you slowly but surely with a bit of effing and jeffing. Okay, a lot of effing and jeffing along the way, but it just it just used to make me laugh because I was like, oh, you don't see what I see. It's okay. And yeah, slowly but surely, as you started to unfold into that, it was just incredible to see, because I saw all that latent spiritual essence within you and your true femininity, and then actually seeing that unfold over the last 2.5 years it's just been incredible to see that. But one thing I want to share with anyone who's listening to this, or any women who are listening to this, who are perhaps psychologically in the place that Bliss was, is that, you know, if you feel that in your heart, then it's waiting. It's waiting to present itself. It's waiting to infuse itself into who you truly are, because that is actually who we truly are. You know, is one thing I keep saying till I'm blue in the face, but what we are is a really beautiful, divine, spiritual power. And our sentience is here in our heart. Our body of energy is a bit further lower down, towards our base chakras, and those two things combined are the essence of who we truly are. But that's within the context of these incredible physical bodies that we have, and particularly for women as well, because as we've heard in this conversation, the I was going to say craziness, but I might get shot. But the ups and downs and left and rights of navigating
Fluidity and fluctuations.
Yeah, the navigating the cyclical nature of that is just incredible. And I think it's really, really important that we remember who and what we truly are, but we truly honor our bodies and our inherent physical nature as well.
Yeah, I think that's a super important point to make as well, because when you're on the pill, I think this society is something that I've spoken about recently too, and that women are cyclical. Women, your hormones, there's 4 different phases to your cycle, and your emotions, the way that you think, the way that your body is, your hormones, it all changes throughout the month. And in this society, we're all about linear, continual growth and being on the same, like knowing, control where things are at, being able to predict things. And it goes against like female physiology. And so there's so much shame around emotions and the fact we feel emotions and they change, and people struggle to get it. And I understand that men struggle to understand it more because they're not in that space, so it's going to be more
and
difficult.
programming as well.
Yeah.
And programming as well, because you look at how we're brought up as men. You know, you've heard me say this, Bliss, so many times over the years that you've known me. I've shared this conversation with so many other men and women over the years, is that we have terrible role models as kids. I mean, I'm really, really fortunate, because even though I went down a very dark path for a long time because of early life trauma, I was always, as a kid, really, really, really connected to my sense of who I and what I truly was, my spiritual core. And as such, I saw things very, very differently from the majority of most guys. And so I've been really, really fortunate that I've been blessed with that anchor, that remembering of always being connected to that, even though, again, you know, I went down a dark path for a long time. But at the same, but I bring that up because for the majority of guys who don't have that connection as strongly, the reinforcement of the programming about what it means to be a man in this world is dire. It's friends at school, the male role models in our life, fathers, uncles, grandfathers, and so on. The BS that we see in Hollywood and media, it's all designed to disconnect us from our true masculinity, and it brings out what's generally bandied about as toxic masculinity, which, as you know, is an expression that I absolutely abhor, because there's either masculinity or there's immaturity. There's either toxic immature behavior or there's masculinity, and that is it. And so I bring that up because it is really, really, really important for us as men to educate ourselves and to tap into our spiritual core. So we can, at least to a certain degree, feel what it is that our partners, our mothers, our sisters, our female friends, our female work colleagues are actually experiencing as they go through their cycle, because then it allows us to connect and to remain in a space of love and compassion and understanding and empathy that makes life better for everybody, for men and for women. And so it is really, really, really important that as men that we do this work to understand that, because of the terribly dysfunctional programming that the majority of us have had as we've navigated our way through life.
Yeah, it is super important. And I think, well, firstly, if there are any men or women, but if there are any men listening to this, watching this, that want to understand more, because I think the first part of it is the education, and is kind of trying to find out more about what does happen. It's important to realize that that's not exactly what happens with every woman, depending on where she's at in her cycle. There are many people, a lot of people have hormone imbalances right now. So it's not necessarily how it's going to be. We don't function in a textbook way. You can't go, okay, this is how you're meant to be, so you must be like this, and if I apply this, this is going to happen. Again, this is why people struggle to understand women, or why some men struggle to understand women, because you can't just apply, this is how you're meant to be, this is how you are, and without, like, it's not dogmatic, it's not kind of placing stereotypes on things, but that's how it is. Men are much more predictable, men are much more linear in your makeup, in the way that you think. Absolutely. You are. And
which is a good
aren't.
thing. Which is a good thing. Yeah. We need to hold that. We need to hold that space for the women in our lives. The masculine needs to hold that space for the feminine. However, we do need a really healthy dose of compassion and empathy with that to understand the nature that you're describing of how women move fluidly through their cycle.
And this is what I was going to say earlier as well when you mentioned it, and that when we're talking about these differences, again, because of conditioning, there's a lot of shame that comes around that, and there's like, oh, we shouldn't feel, we're like this, so we need to change it, and be aware of how we are so we can change it and we can act differently. But I want everyone to know, men and women, that we're designed in this way for a reason. We are different. We're meant to be different to make this world go round in the way that it does, or could. So it's embracing. We're built differently. We're designed differently for a very important reason. So although you might feel shame around it, I'm not going to say don't feel shame around it. That doesn't help. But it's understanding that you're meant to be this way. This is your most natural form. And try to take the steps that you can to get used to that. And you don't have to kind of make that public, but do it behind the scenes at first. Like women especially, do like journal on how you feel at different points in your cycle, so that you can become aware of how you feel, look at the patterns of how you feel, and then you can support yourself. And again, this is the work that I do, work with yourself, because so many women are working against themselves. And then this is why you feel so stressed, so anxious, so depressed and frustrated. You're not being able to achieve the things that you want in life. You're not being able to actually feel happy or be healthy. Because when you go against yourself, you're then going against your body and how you like your natural cycles and how you're meant to be. And it impacts your health, and not just your hormones. Again, everything is interlinked, so it impacts everything. So what I was going to say earlier is, if there are men, again, or women that are wanting to educate themselves on this, I think that's the first step, is to listen to some podcasts. If there are guys out there that aren't sure where to go, please message me and I can send podcast or information podcast your way. There are some amazing books that I have read that go into the science behind it as well. So if you're more science minded, then there are some great books that I can suggest. And that is the key, to just have a greater understanding of it. And then simply asking your partner or asking the women around you where they're at, and supporting them in that, asking them what they need, how they're feeling. And it interlinks with everything. I think we're going into a cycles conversation now, which could be a whole other podcast. There's a lot to talk about within that, but
no, it's okay. Carry on.
Yeah, so it's down to things like if you're in a relationship with a female, or whatever the situation is, but women at certain points in their cycle, they are more social, they feel more social. So around ovulation, women are much more social, they want to go out. And so that would be a time where, I don't know, you go out to some fancy restaurant on a date, and she's going to feel much more kind of in her power, and she's going to enjoy it much more. She's going to want to do that. But then you're going to go like, okay, same, you have a date night every week. She's now in her luteal phase, and she is just before her period is about to come. She's not going to want to do that. Or she's less like, she might, but she's less likely to want to go out and be seen and be social and kind of share and be open. She's going to want to probably, again, don't want to stereotype, everyone's different. This is why I'm saying ask those questions, so that you know and get feedback, because things change all the time. And that's the thing with women, is that this is the key to understand, is that things change all the time, and not shaming her for changing her mind or feeling different. That's how she feels. You create shame, you create an unsafe environment for her. She's not going to want to share things. She's going to then try and force herself again to go against herself, and that's then going to end up in kind of resentment, a lack of trust and safety within your relationship, and she's not going to be able to be her true self, and it's then going to create a disconnection between the two of you. But just before your period, you're more likely to kind of want to sit at home and maybe, I don't know, cook a meal at home or watch film, or not go out and be so social. You can probably guess where I'm at in my cycle where I'm doing this podcast. I'm not right before my period, that's for sure, because I wouldn't be this social and talkative. And again, it's not like there are differences, but it's not it's not set in stone. Things change, and it's not that I couldn't do this. I could still do this, but I just feel much better and in my power doing this around ovulation time, because that's naturally where I'm at. And when we understand these things as women, we can then plan things around our cycles, again, working with ourselves, exactly how I teach the women that I coach. And it's not that you can't do it, it's not that you're weak, just because you can doesn't mean you should. And understanding that if you're trying to get the most from life, if you're trying to get the most from your job, from whatever it is that your goal is that you're trying to achieve, then why not work it around your cycles and make it work for you, rather than try to work against yourself all the time, because it doesn't end well.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? Like when we sit and have this conversation and you think, yeah, why would you try and push water uphill with your bare hands when just let it flow downhill when it needs to flow downhill? But yeah, we get so caught up in everyday life that it's so easy to forget this, which is why it's so important for men and women that we make a conscious decision to continually, I was going to say study it, but that's not really the right word, but continually educate ourselves and embody that, and then turn that into ways of being, so it then becomes a subconscious behavior. But you know, that takes time and understanding. But once we've done that, you know, it's like anything in life. You know, using a learning to drive a car analogy, you know, it's crazy because you're so in your head about it at first, but then, you know, a year later, you're like driving with one hand on the phone, well, through the hands-free, obviously. You know, kids shouting in the back, you know, calming them down, eating a McDonald's, or well, I shouldn't be saying eating a McDonald's on this podcast, but we're all about health and wholeness and eating properly. But I'm just using that as a silly analogy. But it is really important to. My favorite expression is just stay in the conversation. If this is something that's important to you, stay in the conversation, educate yourself. Whether woman or man, depending on you know what it is that's important in terms of that understanding. But please stay in the conversation. I will actually put a link to Bliss's Instagram in this, which you'll be able to find. I presume it's going to be down in the notes underneath this. Might be up, who knows, in this fluid world that we live in. So thanks for that, Bliss. You just really, honestly, we could probably go for another 3 or 4 hours, but yeah, I guess it's this is probably a good place to wrap it up. But I do have 2 final questions that I'm going to be asking all of my guests. The first one is, how has this experience, overall, sort of, you know, high level view, how has this experience impacted your personal healing and professional journey?
Yeah, so hugely. And I think just before kind of answering that question, just to kind of speak a little bit more about retrospectively, as I say, in terms of the pill, I didn't realize what impacts it had at the time, and it's not until after and kind of years after that I've realized the impacts of it. And just to kind of mention a few, it completely like disconnects your brain to your pituitary gland, to other glands, and your ovaries. It's crazy fact that it shrinks your ovaries by 50%. Like it's crazy. There's so many impacts. Your gut health, it like impacts, like in terms of depression, anxiety, there's so much more. You're much more likely to go on antidepressants if you're on the pill. There are so many different ways that it impacts you. Like low libido, reduces the size of like your clitoris, your vulva tissue, reduces the your impact to like orgasm and actually feel and enjoy like sexual, like enjoy pleasure. There are so many ways that it impacts you. It completely depletes your nutrients and changes the way that your body metabolizes the things that you eat. So you then end up becoming like nutrient deficient in things as well. There are loads of different ways that it impacts you. And so linking that back into the question in terms of how it's impacted me in every way, I feel like, and it's not until years after that I've noticed that was a huge kind of milestone and turning point in my life, where coming off the pill, I didn't realize it would have such a big impact for me at the time. But so much has changed in my life since then. And all of that can be linked into reconnecting with myself, my true self, who I really am. It's impacted my healing massively because I feel it kept me in a more masculine space and a more disconnected space. So me reconnecting with myself and at least not having that separation has allowed me to then become aware of the things that I've either been avoiding, not been aware of, or suppressed in some way. And it's allowed me to really reconnect with my feminine. Like that's been the huge thing of, it's allowed me to reconnect with my feminine, or connect with my feminine, because I can't necessarily remember a time other than maybe when I was a kid, but a tomboy too, but that I was like really connected with the feminine aspect of me. And when I say feminine, I'm also talking about energetically, not like gender or sex side of things. And that has created such a huge shift in my life. That's been one of the things that's created a huge shift in my healing as well. And so of course there's many factors.
Yeah, on a personal relationship point of view, not necessarily just with partners, but just interacting with people generally. What impact? How's that impacted it?
Yeah, so I believe that the way that we interact with everything and everyone stems from the relationship that we have with ourselves. So if you don't feel confident, if you feel insecure, you feel like you're suppressing parts of yourself, that's how you're going to show up in your relationships. And so me making that shift and reconnecting with myself, I know who I am then, or more of who I am. Life's a continual process of finding more about yourself, but I know who I am. I can become more secure, more confident, more peaceful with who I am. And so then that's how I show up in the relationships that I have, with the people, the connections that I make, with the people that I meet. And they become much more meaningful connections that you have with people, and deeper connections. You get that sense of fulfillment, and you can connect with people. You can meet them at a deeper level. And it really has changed everything. And in terms of business, like I've gone from being a personal trainer to doing a lot more of the mindset work and being a more kind of having a holistic approach, focusing on the mindset side of things, the connection to our emotions and our emotional aspects, the spiritual aspect of things, coming from someone who didn't believe that was a thing, and then the physical side of things as well, not just fitness, how there's much more to it, how everything is interlinked, how we can't, if we want to truly change our lives, we want an actual transformation, we can't just focus on fitness. That's not going to get you there. It's everything. There's many aspects of it. So yeah, it's changed everything. I'm now a holistic coach and help women to connect with all of these aspects. And I work with people within gyms, and I still do the fitness side of things, but have a much more holistic approach and focus on the more of the mindset side of things, the emotional, the self-care side of things, but also work with women online purely within the mindset side of things, and the mental, emotional, spiritual side of things. And we go into this stuff within cycles, and they found that this is one of the most impactful things ever, because they're like, why didn't I realize that this changes so much? And they've realized that when they're aware of where they're at in their cycle, and then they work with themselves, rather than, I should be doing this, I should be doing that, because this is what society have said, or this is what their partner, a man has said, that isn't aware of cycles. They're then putting that pressure on themselves to be a certain way, but that's not where they're at. They're not working with themselves. They're not actually tuning into where they're at. They're going on what they think they should do, and that's not helping them. So they're continually working against them. Yeah, they're continually working against themselves, and it's not getting them to where they want to be anyway. So it's not creating the desired effect. So yeah, it's huge. It impacts everyone. And like you say, it's
that's just amazing, Bliss. I mean, your passion is just it's just bursting out of you for this. You are definitely on the right path. It's absolutely incredible. So my final question is, we're going to go in a little time machine now, go back in time. About a few years. I was going to say exactly how many, but then I don't want to age you. If you could go back right now to 15-year-old you, knowing what you know, what are the top two pieces of advice you'd give to yourself? Go, in the car with your mum at the time on the way to the doctor's surgery.
Specifically referring to the topic of conversation today.
Yeah, specifically around the pill. What advice would you go back to? Two pieces of advice you'd give 15-year-old you.
I think I think that the main one would just be to educate myself, to know that there are other ways, to know that, to tell her that the pill or any hormonal contraceptives aren't the only options, that there are other ways, and to then educate myself around that, and on my cycles. That's the main. That would have changed everything. I was also going to say that to not trust everything that the medical professionals say, but yeah, that would be the main one. Like if I were to have had that information, it's all about informed consent. Like I don't think that the pill should be taken away and it should be abolished, or hormonal contraceptives shouldn't be a thing. In some situations, it's going to help people. If people still want to use those things and they understand how that's going to impact them in every single way, then that's fine. That's their decision to make, and we're all entitled to make our own decisions. It's super important for us to be take responsibility for ourselves, and but the key is to be able to take our power back and know that there's another way, to have that, to educate ourselves, because sadly we're not being educated within mainstream education, media, any professionals. So to educate ourselves, to seek more information, read around the subject, and to know that there's another way, that you don't have to kind of create that disconnection from yourself. I would give my 15-year-old self all of the information around the impacts that could and would have on me. And to know that that's not the only way, to then kind of research into my cycles and connect with my body from the start, so that I can read all the cues and know when I'm ovulating and when I'm in my fertile phase, to then kind of prevent the pregnancy that I initially went on the pill to stop anyway. There are ways, and people would tell you that it's not an effective way, but if you know your body, it really is. It's important, and it's important anyway to connect with our bodies. One of the books that I would recommend is called The Fifth Vital Sign, and it's called that because it's now been recognized by people that our menstrual cycles, our periods, are one of the vital signs of our health, that we can tell, where like you being able to connect to your health and what's going on within your body, your cycles, can be an indicator of where your health is at, in terms of like your period flow and kind of pain and things like that. Gives you an indicator as to what's going on within your body as well. Being aware of these things and knowing how to tune into my body, and that I wouldn't have to take a pill to do that.
Yeah, brilliant. And seeing as you asked right at the very beginning, I'm actually curious to know what your answer to this is. What's the wider piece of life advice you'd give to 15-year-old you?
That I won't be feeling. I would let her know that I won't be feeling this amount of pain, turmoil, frustration, anxiety, depression forever. And that just a few more years and she won't feel it to that intensity anymore.
Oh, so beautiful. So beautiful. And a really beautiful place to end this conversation. I love it.
Thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you, Bliss. This has been amazing. I feel like we've only just got warmed up, but in the interest of a reasonable amount of brevity, I think this is a great place to end. So thank you so much for being my very first guest on the inaugural, I can't even say the word, the first Soul Leadership Tribe podcast. That was incredible. I know so many people, men and particularly women, are going to get value from that. I just really appreciate you sharing your time with me and with the audience today. So finally, where can people find you if they want to check out more of what you do?
Yeah, so the best place will be on Instagram at Holistic Bliss, with a holistic with a W at the beginning. Yeah, best place is on there. And if, as I said within the podcast as well, if anyone wants to find out more, then please feel free to give me a message and I will send some resources your way. I do have some like bits of information within my story highlights on Instagram as well. Some within the books, and I have a highlight on cyclical living as well. So yeah, but please feel free to give me a message and I can send things your way, because I think it's super important for us all to understand as well. If you're a guy as well, please don't be kind of nervous or think you shouldn't message me. It's super important for everyone to understand, whether you're a heterosexual guy or not. We all live in this world together, and it's super important to understand where everyone's at and to be able to work together, especially with where we're at in the world right now.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So yeah, please ask and I will share all resources.
Wonderful. Well, we're going to have to get you back again in the future for another conversation, but for now, I'm going to say thank you again. This has been absolutely wonderful. I have absolutely loved this conversation and very much looking forward to our next chat. And for everyone viewing, thank you. If you're still here, thank you for staying till the end. And as always, this is mostly going to go out on YouTube, but on any other podcast resources that you hear this, please like, comment and share, because it helps the algorithm to think that we're really popular and more people see it. So I would really love and appreciate that. And any questions, contact me through comments, or you can find me at franco.demori on Instagram, which I will put all this down in the notes section to the podcast. But for now, we'll see you all soon. And thanks again, Bliss.
Yeah, thank you so much.
You're very welcome.